If you've been on the internet recently, you've probably seen stuff about AI and specifically about a thing called Chat GPT. I didn't think too much of it at first, but then a friend of mine who's a scientist was telling me all about it, and he was able to use Chat GPT to help him design experiments. Basically, he would describe kind of what he wants to do, and then Chat GPT was able to give him suggestions on different techniques and really help him review the literature that's been done because this system here has access to pretty much anything that's on the internet, so it can pull up a lot of journal articles and a lot of like old scientific literature that has long been forgotten. So, because of that, and because of all the videos that I've been seeing, can Chat GPT replace doctors or replace lawyers? I decided to give it a try and see what this platform could possibly do for mechanics, for people who just drive cars, and for automotive enthusiasts. So there are two main areas where I think Chat GPT could be very helpful. The first is for a person who's inexperienced working on cars and who needs help. Let's say their car won't start, or let's say there's something wrong with their car. They can ask Chat GPT to help them identify the issue, maybe help them be able to fix their cars themselves, basic issues like changing a light bulb or something. And then the other way that I see Chat GPT being useful is with experienced mechanics. Let's say you're not exactly sure where something is on a particular car, or instead of looking up torque specs, you can just ask this and it'll be able to pull up information really easily. You can also kind of talk back and forth and come up with ideas on how to wire something on a car, or how to fix something, or how to make something if you're doing some fabrication work. And so I am going to test out each of these. So a fairly simple task is changing a light bulb in a car. It's depending on the car, again, there's going to be individual differences. There might be a couple bolts that you have to undo. But let's see if ChatGTP can create a template that anyone could follow to be able to change their headlight bulb in a particular car. So in the prompt, I laid out what kind of vehicle I have. That's going to be important because it needs to know what kind of vehicle I have in order for it to provide specific advice, because the general idea is the same for all of these newer cars that don't have the sealed beam headlights. The general process is the same, but then there's specifics for each car. I ask it for specific instructions, and that's one thing I noticed with ChatGTP is you have to ask it to be specific, otherwise it'll tend to provide more broad and generalized answers. So at first it tells me just turn off the vehicle, make sure the headlights are not on. That's good. Open the hood and locate the headlight assembly on the driver's side of the vehicle. Yep. Look for the back of the headlight assembly. Yep. Bulb holder, black or gray plastic cap covering it. Yeah. Twist counterclockwise. That is correct. A lot of these electrical connectors have little like locking tabs, so you have to press down on a little locking tab in order to remove the connector. So just pulling it straight out might not work the best. Yeah, remove the old bulb, take the new bulb. I really love the fact that it says don't touch the glass part of the bulb. That is very important advice, so that's good. If you do that, the oils from your fingers get onto the bulb, and then as it heats up, it can actually cause the bulb to blow much faster. Reconnect the electrical, push the bulb in, twist the locking cap, and then check the bulb. So that was pretty good. The two things I didn't like about this, number one, the specifics of the electrical connector, and then number two, you can't actually get to the back of the headlight assembly because it's blocked. It's not the radiator shroud, it's like the upper core support or something, but basically there's stuff in the way, so you can't actually get to it. And so that is where you see the first problem here. So the easiest way for that particular vehicle to change a headlight is to remove the headlight assembly. So what you do is you remove that bolt right there, and then the bolt down in there. You remove those 3 bolts, and then you can just pull the headlight assembly kind of straight out. Kind of have to tilt it a little to get around the side of the bumper, but pretty easy. And to put it back, you do the exact opposite. But this is wanting me to remove, and again, it's kind of my fault because I said radiator shroud when that's not quite exactly what's in the way. But again, if I am someone who doesn't really know what these car parts are called, I can't really describe them to Chat GPT. And so, yeah, it just wants me to do it in an odd way. Okay, and then everything else is exactly the same. So let's ask it another question. So I asked it how to open the hood on this vehicle. Okay, hood release is down there. This you push over and then lift up on the hood. Yeah, that's a push kind of up or over. So this part here, where it says press down on the hood latch with your hand and lift up on the hood at the same time, that's just not true. Okay, let's ask it, how do I check the oil? Be careful not to overfill the engine. So that's one thing that I wish it would have told me is never check your oil when the engine is warm. You always want to have the engine cold. That way all the oil has settled out into the bottom of the oil pan. When the engine is still warm, all that oil is still up in the valves and in all the pathways and all over all the places that the oil goes to. So you have to wait until all that oil is back down into the oil pan. Otherwise, you'll have this false low reading. So you always need to make sure your engine is cool, or at least not warm. So let your engine sit for 15 minutes at least is what I usually do. But normally what I do is I check the oil first thing in the morning before I've even started the car. But other than that, that part seems to be good. The question for what type of oil, that is good. That is correct, 5W30. And then it talks about high mileage oils. So I'm going to ask it. So I went ahead and asked it to be a little more specific, and let's see what it tells me. I mean, That's pretty standard that they're usually toward the front of the engine and they are usually yellow plastic and say engine oil on them. So yeah, I'd say that's good enough that anybody could find it.
I asked it where the spare tire is located because the spare tire is, I wanted to see what it would say.
The spare tire in my 2008 Pontiac Torrent um, is not underneath the vehicle. These steps here, from step number 5 here until through step number 7, where you're lowering the spare tire, that all does not that would not be useful advice. So the spare tire in my 2008 Pontiac Torrent, now it is possible, I guess, that some models had it some way, some models had it another way. Um, so or maybe it has something to do with the modifications that my vehicle had because it had some sort of handicap accessibility stuff in it at one point. But I have a spare tire, and it is in the back hatch area, and you just lift up the floor basically, and that's where the tire is. Um, so I'm going to probe it a little bit.
So it told me the spare tire is underneath the car, which it's not. So I went ahead and asked it, I don't see the spare tire under the car. Is there another place that it could be?
Okay, so yeah, number one, it's inside the cargo area. Again, that back hatch portion underneath a cover. Um, but again, I think what's happening here is it's just giving me some generic advice and not specific advice.
I asked it where the jack is located because this is a really good question to ask because in this car, the jack isn't located right next to the tire like it is in other vehicles. It's actually in a separate compartment.
Okay, perfect. This right here is exactly how it is. There's, if you open the lift gate, and on the left side, the driver's side of the cargo area, right on the side there, there's a little compartment thing. It's got a little handle on it, and it's got a picture of a jack on it. Um, and then you open that up, and then all the tools are in. I believe they're in like a little bag thing. Um, and so they're all right there. So that is good advice. And actually, my mom got a flat tire with this Pontiac once, and she, was able to find the spare tire just fine, and she knows how to change the tire. But then she couldn't find the jack because in all the other cars that she's driven, the jack is like normally held like right in with the spare tire. The And so she ended up having to, there was a house nearby, so she ended up having someone there help her. They had like a regular floor jack, which probably made the job easier. But so yeah, that is one thing that does come up is, you get a flat tire and then you realize you don't actually know where your spare tire is, where your jack is. And so that is very good advice. So I went ahead and hit it with a known issue. So the service stabilitrack warning, service stabilitrack, service traction control off, all-wheel drive off. All these warnings are a known issue on Pontiac Torrents. And so I just asked it what it means, and yeah, generally is supposed to be what it means. But also a lot of these cars have these issues when actually the traction control is working perfectly fine. I agree, you should get the vehicle looked at to make sure that that's all fine, but there was actually a recall on these Pontiac Torrents that involved um, a faulty wiring harness, or the wiring harness rubbing up against the transfer case. So I'm going to ask that, are there any recalls for this vehicle? I'll ask it generally if there are any recalls, and then if it doesn't come up with it, I'll ask it specifically about a recall on the Stabilitrack. Okay, that's a safe answer. Um, yeah, I mean, you can go in and type the information in yourself. I was kind of hoping that it would pull it up, but I guess because you want to search by year, make, and model, it doesn't have all the information. Okay, so basically what happened was I asked it about the power steering fluid reservoir, and this was kind of a trick question. Now, it is a question that someone who is maybe not so familiar with this vehicle, or maybe not so mechanically inclined, would ask. If they're making sure that all their fluids are topped off, they might ask about hey, what about the power steering fluid? Because if you look under the hood of the Pontiac Torrent, you can see your brake fluid, you can see your coolant, you can see your engine oil, your dipstick, and your fill tube, and you can see your windshield washer fluid reservoir, but there is no power steering fluid reservoir visible. So when I asked it about where is the power steering fluid reservoir, because that's a question that someone might ask, they told me that it was in the front of the engine. It has a cap that says power steering fluid. And then at first I was like, wait a minute, does this actually have a power steering fluid reservoir? Have I just been blind this entire time? So I pull up a photo I have of the engine bay, and I have that front passenger side. I actually have the airbox removed and the alternator, and so a whole bunch of stuff is removed, so I can really see that front corner of the engine. And there is no power steering fluid reservoir. And looking at the belt routing, it doesn't look like there would be a power steering pump on the engine like there normally would. So I went ahead and Googled it, and I found this. And sure enough, it's what I thought from the beginning, that it's got electric power steering. So there's no hydraulic power steering on this vehicle. So I went ahead and said, hey, I don't see a power steering fluid reservoir. And it was able to correct itself. Yeah, the power steering is all electric, which means when you run out, when your alternator dies, and then your battery dies because it's not been charged by the alternator, and you lose all of your electronics, the power steering is the first thing to go. Now, of course, you will still have mechanical steering, it just won't be power assisted, so it'll be a little bit harder. But luckily, the steering wheel in Pontiac Torrent is nice and big, so you can actually move it even when you don't have power steering. But so what I did here again is, I tried to mess it up. So I asked it where the window switches are. Now, on most vehicles, the window switches are on the door panel near the armrest. However, on the 2008 Pontiac Torrent, they are located on the center console. So this is, once again, it's giving me just very generic advice, which, yes, in a lot of cars, that advice will be fine. But when I'm looking for advice on a specific car, so then it's like, oh yeah, on some vehicles, it's located on the center console between the front seats, which is where they are located.
So Chat GPT told me that the
window switches were on the door. They aren't. And I asked it that, and then I was like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. They might be on the center console, which is exactly where they are in this car. Eventually got there, but it basically had to go from the most generic answer to, more. It's not even like it's looking up the specific car and has found information on like that specific car. It's just kind of giving you general car advice, which, I mean, I guess overall it could be helpful, but like it's still just, I don't know. I guess it's the same as asking, a friend of yours that knows cars. Yes, it is in the engine compartment and it is on the driver's side. It is actually the exact opposite side as the air filter housing. The air filter is on the passenger side, not the driver's side. The battery is not located behind the air filter housing. It is not located towards the back of the engine compartment. It's actually located toward the front of the engine compartment. You don't need to remove the air filter housing. And it mentions nothing about the engine control module, which is sitting on top of the battery box. So yeah, that advice is just completely wrong, and would have a person looking in the complete wrong spot. And this is actually a question that my mom asked once because she didn't know where the battery was. She opened the hood and she couldn't see it because it's inside a battery box. And so we had to go through and like look at everything and figure out where that battery was. But Chat GPT is better than a search engine like Google because it can compile information into easy to understand steps. However, you don't see the sources of the information, so it is harder to verify. Getting car advice from ChatGPT may be easier than talking to a friend who knows cars because it is always available. However, a friend who knows cars will be able to guide you much better when you are both looking at the car. ChatGPT is missing that visual component. You can't show it the part that you're talking about, and it can't show you how to do stuff. That's why either a friend who knows how to work on cars to guide you, or even a YouTube tutorial, is going to be much better for helping you work on your own car. So yeah, I think we've just about seen the limitations of ChatGPT in this sense here. So I am going to open a brand new chat, and I am going to